Hi folks, Daniel here with another how-to on the Jet Fuel Only channel. Today we're talking about oil changes. This video is going to be great for people that have never changed their oil as well as people who have. Now this video will be most helpful to anybody that has a 3.6 liter V6 engine in their GM vehicle. That's because most of those 3.6 liter engines have similar architecture and their oil drain and filter are all going to be in similar locations. But I'm doing it on my V-Sport with the twin turbo V6, so there's going to be some minor variances. So stick around and I'm going to show you all the details. So you're probably wondering, well, why should you just change your oil yourself anyway? Well, I have a few reasons. Number one is I don't like people touching my car. I'm kind of a car fan and I really don't believe that anyone's going to treat my car as well as I treat it. Plus, places may have a lot of experience, but they also develop complacency and they could put the wrong oil in, too much or too little. I mean, it's really unlikely, but I'd rather not risk it. The other thing is time. When I have my supplies at home, I can knock out an oil change in any free 30 minutes that I have. But if I have to go to the dealer, well, my dealer is 20 minutes away, so that's 40 minutes round trip. Plus I gotta wait for them to get the oil change done. They might take their sweet time, it might take an hour, and I might not be first in line. So you're gonna save at least an hour or two doing it yourself. The most important factor for me though is money. The dealer may give you free oil changes as part of a maintenance plan while your car's under warranty. And that's free, but I like synthetic oil in my car. And if I ask for that, they're gonna charge me an extra $45. Now, once your maintenance plan runs out, oil changes could be $50 to $75 for regular oil. So with the synthetic upcharge, I mean, I'm looking at least $100 for an oil change. If I buy my supplies from Walmart, where I find they're pretty cheap, I can do this for less than $50 at home. Now, why do we want to change our oil? Well, oil is the lifeblood of the engine, and it's important because it does a number of things. First, it helps keep the engine cool. It helps take away some of the heat from those metal parts, runs it through an oil cooler, and goes back to help cool it some more. Also, of course, oil lubricates. There's a lot of metal parts rubbing against each other, and without oil, they would get really hot really fast and start to disintegrate. Lastly, oil is a cleaner. It has detergents in it, and it grabs all the carbon and microscopic metal shavings that happen with normal engine wear, and it takes it all to the filter and puts it there safely so it's not damaging your engine. But unfortunately, oil can't do this forever, so you gotta change it every now and then. And the filter, it gets clogged after a while, so you gotta change it too. Now, another question is when should you change your oil? Your dad or grandpa might have always told you every 3,000 to 5,000 miles in 3 to 6 months or something like that. But that old adage applied as a general for all cars, and all cars aren't the same, and people don't drive cars the same. So thankfully we have technology now, and most modern cars have an oil life monitoring system. It takes into account things like engine revolutions and mileage driven and temperatures the car's faced to determine when your oil needs to be changed. And honestly, they're getting pretty accurate. And I trust my oil life monitor, but I do have limits. So the oil life monitor starts at 100%, and at 0, it's gonna tell you to change your oil, and my manual says, get it changed within 600 miles of that. Well, I actually just go to about 20%. Once it's under 20%, I do an oil change, and most dealers are gonna require at least that, or maybe even down to 5%. With my average driving of 12,000 miles a year, I actually end up changing my oil about twice a year, every 6 months, and I get about 7,000 miles. If I were to take it down to 0, I think I could get about 9,000 miles, and this is typical for a lot of cars these days. But the oil life monitor is only as good as the person that reset it. If it wasn't reset at the last oil change, it's considered inaccurate, and follow the manual as to when to change the oil at that time. Now, to change your oil, you only need 2 supplies. You need oil and a filter. I like to get my oil at Walmart because it's pretty cheap there. I prefer to put synthetic oil in my car. If your car says it can take regular oil, go ahead and do that, but synthetic is generally better. I also choose Mobil 1. Mobil 1 isn't necessarily the best oil, and people are gonna argue about it all the time, but it's definitely not the worst. I would say it's somewhere in the top 5 or so. I choose Mobil 1 because, well, I've used it in all my cars in the last 19 years and it's done well. Even one of my cars had 150 extra horsepower and ran for over 200,000 miles. And that says something. It's not all about the oil, but it is a factor. Also, Mobil 1 is easily available. I can find it in most stores, and it's a pretty good price. I'm not paying insane prices for some very special oil. But you may choose Pennzoil or Royal Purple or AMSoil, whatever it is, be sure to do your own research. I've provided some links in the description below for you to do some research. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. You want to make sure you get the right oil weight, the right quantity, and that the specifications listed on the back meet your manufacturer's specifications. And Mobil 1 does that for me. My car takes 7 quarts, so I've got a 5-quart jug and the leftover oil from the last oil change, so I should have plenty to do my 7 quarts. As for filters, there's a lot to choose from, but I just stick to what's available in the aisle and I don't necessarily buy the cheapest kind. They can be as little as like $5, they could be, I don't know, $20, but there's a point where you just don't get as much bang for your buck, but I also don't want the bottom of the barrel. This one was only about $10, and it's got some nice grippiness on it so I can unscrew it and screw it on easily. All right, so let's get to the oil change, but stick around to the end because today I'm also gonna be taking an oil sample and sending it off to Blackstone Labs for an oil analysis. And I'll have my oil analysis report at the end of the video. Let's get to it. Here's a quick overview. First, lift the car, then remove the oil drain bolt to drain out the oil. Replace the oil drain bolt, then remove the oil filter. Replace the oil filter with a new one. Then lower the car and fill the engine with the appropriate amount and type of oil. For this installation, you'll need the following tools. Most GM oil drain plugs are 15 millimeters, so you'll need a 15 millimeter wrench. A closed wrench of subtype is best, but I do prefer a socket in this case. You'll also need something to get the oil filter off. It's usually on there too tight to get with your hand. Some filters have this grip material around it. It makes it easier to get off, but 99% of the time it's not gonna happen by hand, so you need an oil filter wrench. This expands to get around the oil filter like this. And once you get it on there, it tightens up as you turn left or counterclockwise to loosen the oil filter. You only need it to get the oil filter off. You put the oil filter back on by hand. You'll need a funnel to refill the oil without making a mess, and it's always a good idea to have some rags or paper towels around because you're bound to spill a little bit of oil somewhere. Now, the other important supply you're gonna need is some type of oil drain pan. This one collects the oil, and then you can pull this plug and it all goes into a lower chamber for later disposal. It's easy to dispose of it because it has a spout on one end. And while it's draining in there, there is a vent so that it doesn't bubble up and splatter oil everywhere while it's going down in the chamber. This vent's also good, of course, when draining out the front nozzle. These come in different sizes. Make sure you get the right size that will hold enough oil from your car. Usually I can put 2 or 3 oil changes in this. Once I'm done with that, I usually dump all the oil from here into one of my empty canisters like this, and I'll take it to my local auto parts store for recycling. Of course, you'll also need a jack and jack stands. Before you buy oil, check your manual to see what specifications are required and also what quantity of oil is required. For most 3.6 engines, you're going to need 6 quarts of oil. For my engine, I need 7. You can find the original GM part number for the oil filter in the manual, but if you want to buy a filter from the parts store, you'll just need to use the computer or booklet they have there in the filter aisle. You'll need to properly jack up and support your car to do the oil change. Be sure to check out my other video on how to properly raise your CTS and support it to work on it. Alright, now let's go under the car to take a look and see where the oil filter and oil drain plug are. On the 3.6 liter engine, the drain plug is right next to the oil filter. You'll see the drain plug is a silver 15 millimeter bolt and the filter is in horizontally. This may differ if you have a front wheel drive car. Now in 2016, the Cadillac ATS CT6, CTS, and a lot of 2017, 2018 GM models got the LGX motor. That's the non-turbo 3.6 liter V6, and it looks a lot like this, but the oil filter is pointing straight up into the engine instead of horizontal like on mine. Prior to these years, the 3.6 was the LFX, and the oil filter was found in the engine bay. It's important to note that this is not the oil drain pan. This is the transmission pan, and it has a different kind of drain bolt. Don't drain the transmission. If you do, you're going to have a problem and probably need to be towed to the nearest dealer to have the transmission refilled properly. Before you drain the oil, you'll want to release the oil cap on the top of the engine. This will help the oil drain easier. Now position the oil drain pan under the drain bolt. Remember, there's a little bit of pressure, so the oil is going to spurt outward about a foot and then slowly drain back to going straight down. The oil filter will also drain straight down. Now drain the oil by removing the drain plug. Use your 15 millimeter wrench to loosen the nut. It may be a little tight because over time the heat makes it tight. As you loosen it and get to the last threads, the oil will suddenly spurt out, so position your hand appropriately to make sure that you don't get hot oil on you. This is why I recommend wearing a glove. I'm going to go ahead and take my oil sample for Blackstone Labs now. They suggest taking it not quite at the beginning and not at the end, somewhere in the middle. I've sped up the video, but it may take 5 to 10 minutes for the oil to completely drain out. Then clean off your oil drain plug and make sure that the rubber washer is in good condition. Go ahead and reinstall the drain plug. It's okay if some of the oil is still dribbling out, it's no problem. You'll just clean it up before fully tightening the bolt. Then take your 15mm wrench and put it on snugly. It doesn't have to be too tight. It will tighten up more as the engine heats up, but you don't want it to leak. Next, grab your oil filter wrench and put it on the oil filter to loosen it. Make sure it's set the right way so that you can loosen it with a counterclockwise twist. It'll take a couple turns with the wrench and then you can use your hand. This is where it's helpful to have the grippy filters like the FRAM Extra Guard. Again, you'll want to position your hand appropriately so you don't get oil on you. The oil has a lot of chemicals in it and it's not good to get it on your skin. Once the filter comes off, a lot of oil comes out. Just place it upside down on the oil drain pan to let it drain out, and now you can go get your other filter ready. As for the oil filter, you just want to take it out of the box. Inside, there's nothing. On some cars, there is extra things like maybe a rubber gasket that you need to put on because you take it off and on from different parts of your car. But with our car, that's not the case. You just put this and screw it into the oil filter connector on the bottom of your engine. The instructions here, though, do tell you that you should take a little bit of oil and rub it around the rim of the oil gasket here, and that'll help create a better seal. Now to do that, I usually just take my jug of oil and I tip it over to get a little oil here on the lid, and I'll get some on my finger and I'll rub it around the edge like this. You don't need a lot, just a thin layer. And then we can install the filter. Now that the oil is done draining from the oil filter area, go ahead and wipe it down with a rag. Take your new filter and screw it on. As per the instructions in the box, you want to screw it on until the gasket comes in contact with the seat. And once it does, give it about 3/4 to 1 turn more. It doesn't have to be on there really tight, but it does need to be snug. Again, with heat, it will get tighter. After you've wiped the area, go ahead and remove your oil drain pan from under the car. Then you can take the car off the jack stands and lower it down. Now it's time to put fresh oil in the engine. Remove the oil cap and place a funnel in the oil fill hole. Grab your oil and double check one more time that you have the correct type of oil. Go ahead and pour the bottle in. Then, on my car, remember it takes 7 quarts, so I just cleared out 5 quarts from one bottle and I'll do the last 2 quarts from this one. Again, double checking what type of oil I have. Now that I've poured 7 quarts into my engine, I'm going to take the funnel away and make sure you have a rag handy so it doesn't drip all over your engine. Put your oil cap back on, make sure it seals tightly. Now that you've put in new engine oil, it's time to start the car and get it warmed up. Let it run up to operating temperature and then shut it down. Let it sit for about 10 minutes while the oil that's been circulated around the engine settles down to the bottom of the drain pan. While you wait, this is a good time to start cleaning up. I like to wipe down my oil drain pan and then put the used filter in a plastic bag so I can later take it to the auto parts store for recycling. Always clean your tools before you put them away. After about 10 minutes or so, we can now check the oil level to make sure that it's appropriately full. This is the dipstick after I've wiped it off. You'll see a hash marked area on each end and then empty areas in the center. The oil level should be between the hash marks. Take it off, wipe the stick down, put it back down all the way in until it's seated. Then you can pull it out again and take a look at the measurement. Here you can see oil covers all the sections of the dipstick and goes all the way up to the hash marks on the left side of the screen. That means the oil is full. Go ahead and put your dipstick back in and make sure it's seated. And that's it, you've completed the oil change. Now don't forget to reset the oil life monitor. On most GM cars, you just select the oil life monitor screen and then press and hold the select button to reset. But check your manual as there are many ways to get this done. It's also a good idea to note the mileage in your maintenance log. since I'm sending this oil off for analysis, I'll go ahead and fill out my oil analysis form. Then I'll pack the bottle in the absorbent material and place it in the Ziploc bag. I'll put my form inside the black bottle and then put the Ziploc bag inside from there. I'll close the top and the shipping label is ready to go into the mailbox. Well, we've done it. We've knocked out the oil change on our Cadillac CTS. As you can see, it's not very hard, the steps are simple, and you're saving tons of money and time doing it yourself. Now, before I close out, remember I took an oil sample and I sent it off to Blackstone Labs. So now I'm gonna share my oil analysis report with you. All right, I've received my oil analysis report. It took about 3 weeks and they reply via email with a PDF document of your oil analysis report. The charge to my card was 28 bucks. Not too bad for doing this, maybe once a year. So one oil analysis report is great, but what's even better is multiple so you can get trend information. You want to know if things are getting better or worse over time with your engine. So with that being said, first I want to show you my oil analysis report from last year, and then we'll compare it to this year's. All right, so here's the report. In the unit section, it tells you the make and model of the engine. They had it wrong, and as a lot of people do, they think it's CTS-V, not VSport, so they put supercharged V8. Not a big deal, we had it corrected on the next one. It has the oil type used, the oil use interval, the fuel type, and I put additional info, modified engine. I told them about an extra 100 horsepower, give or take. Then there's the client info and then the comment section, and this is where they give their experienced summary of all the data that's listed below. So it says, Daniel, iron did read higher than average in this sample, but we're not too worried about it. For one, the universal averages are based on just 4,000 miles. Extra iron is a normal side effect of running longer on the oil. So on a per mile basis, this reading is actually okay. But also sometimes modified engines do wear a little more than stock, so the iron could be related to the extra horsepower too. Other metals look great, which is another reason a little extra iron doesn't worry us too much. No contamination was found. All things considered, this first report looks really nice. Okay, well that was good to hear. And then you want to look at the rest, the data that they made that summary off of. The first line has miles or hours on the oil. In aviation, we would use hours on the engine, but for this car, it was 7,000 miles, miles on the unit, 38,000 miles on the engine, the sample date, and then it breaks down all the metals that they measure in the oil, as well as the averages. Well, the averages are just what the measurement was because we only have one sample. And on the far right are universal averages for that engine and that mileage. Of course, these are wrong because they use the wrong engine. At the lower section, it has properties where you can see, what the viscosity measurements were, the flash point, if there's any fuel or antifreeze or water in the oil. These are all great things to know. For example, if there's antifreeze in your oil, that's a good sign that your head gaskets might be going bad. All right, so now we've seen that info, let's compare it to the new one. All right, on the unit, they changed it to the 3.6 liter twin turbo, that's good. We did Mobile 1 again, 5,715 miles. And then in the comments section, it says, Daniel, thanks for the notes. We've put the correct averages up for the 3.6 liter twin turbo engine, and they're now based on an oil run about 6,700 miles. That's the average between the two samples I've sent in so far. Most metals still look good compared to those values, only iron is a little higher than expected, but this is a modified engine, unlike most in our average file, so yours might wear a little differently. In terms of how much iron was put into the oil per mile on this run, that metal is actually a little better than last time. Well, that's good to hear. So it doesn't look like a problem. The flash point was a little low, showing just a harmless trace of fuel. Nice report all told. Okay, that's really good. I just love that they look back at your old information and compare it and really think about what's going on with your oil. All right, so the details you can see now, we've got the latest report on the left and the old one on the right, and in between you can see the averages between them. And then you can compare those averages to the universal averages on the far right. And as you can see, it's the iron that's a little on the high side, but it was definitely lower than last time, so that's cool. And now at the bottom, the properties, same thing, you can compare there, but there is no average listing for universal averages. All right, that's it for the oil analysis report. In aviation, we do an oil analysis on almost every oil change. Why? Because that engine is so critical and we want to see if it's a ticking time bomb or not. Now, Car engines are very reliable, but maybe you do want to know, what's going on with your engine. And if you do, I encourage you to go to the Blackstone Labs website and order an oil analysis kit. Well, that's it for the oil change video. I hope you learned something. If you did, be sure to comment below. Be sure to like and subscribe as well. And I hope we see you next time at our next how-to video.